Hi, I'm Daniel. Ask yourself, what do I really want to do? What's my big dream? The bigger the dream, the better. I specialize in helping people with what seems like impossible dreams. I apply the same mindset I used to climb 30 mountains that had never been climbed before. Some I climbed by myself. It's the same mindset I used to start businesses, which has made me millions of dollars. I did it, and I can coach you to do whatever you'd like to do. Visit dreambigwithdaniel.com. Mention this and receive a free session with me. My guest today is John Chrastka. John's the Executive Director of EveryLibrary, a nonprofit focused on the future of libraries and funding for libraries. You might ask why we need an action group to support libraries. I assumed libraries would always be free, places everyone can go, regardless of politics, where you can go and read what you want without worrying about being charged as a criminal. Yes, I said criminal. That's if there's books at your library and books you actually want to read. When I reached out to John to see if he'd be a guest, it was to discuss the importance of libraries as a means to facilitate learning, discovery, and innovation. I have a degree in aerospace engineering. I recently took my nephew on a field trip to visit the college he was considering, and I was shocked to see the books are gone, replaced with tables to plug in the internet. Libraries, those with books, are a critical resource for innovation and discovery, and it's concerning to think that free, uncensored libraries are at risk. In 2023, Publishers Weekly recognized Chrastka as notable for his work opposing book bans and censorship. I'm going to keep this conversation flexible and let John tell us why libraries are important, what's at risk regarding libraries in our future, and what we can do to keep libraries and books free and available to everyone. Welcome to my show, John.
Daniel, thank you so much for this invitation. What a wonderful introduction. I'm glad to be able to be here to talk with your listeners and you about libraries, both. And you mentioned public and academic. School libraries are in the mix as well here.
So tell me if you have the same experience. I've been to libraries, not every library, but certain ones where I just wander and I get ideas in my head that I wouldn't have got if I wasn't walking through the aisle randomly and going, what's that book, the title, the author, and open it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not discounting the internet. I use AI all the time to help me write a letter faster, cleaner, clearer, to get ideas too. It's great. But I don't think there's people that really get that. Can you maybe, I would try to tell like I just did. Do you have a similar?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I've got statistics and I've got magic. Okay. The statistics side of it is about 20% of Americans right now after the pandemic. It was about 14% before the pandemic were getting their books from libraries. And it was to read for fun, to read for joy, to read for research, to read because they were interested in a topic. That discovery, 20%, 22%, that is largely based on the discovery of it in the stacks. It's largely based on the discovery of it on an app that is well built. It's the wandering around. It's going after a topic that you think is interesting, and then the physical geography of the library, the physical geography of that app allows you to have moments of enlightenment. Mm-hmm. You trip over yourself on the way to the cookbook section, and you're suddenly down a rabbit hole on the culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where you would never have got, even with AI and Google, because AI is just giving you what you ask for. And it's like a random way of discovery.
Well, AI is funny because it wants to please you, Like it's funny when you put in a prompt, it tries to get you as close as it can to the literal interpretation of that prompt. A library has no such courtesy. It's a bit chaotic. If you don't know the Dewey Decimal System or the Library of Congress numbers like the back of your hand, you're going to trip over yourself on the way to what you're looking for.
Which was actually something my younger brother, I was surprised he had this attitude. He's like, yeah, I don't like libraries because I can't find the book I'm looking for. I'm like, well, why don't you go to the catalog? The system, I don't know how you use it. Like, that's because I was fortunate to take a class in high school or something that taught me the Dewey Decimal System because I used to be the same way. These numbers, I don't get this. And yet it's a beautiful system created by people way before there were computers, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You just got to learn how to use it.
Yeah, and the other thing is that the nice thing about a library is it's got librarians in it, and that the human interaction should not be discounted. There's the individual discovery moments, there's the wandering, there's the appreciative inquiry that one does, but then there's the opportunity for either coaching or intermediation too. I mean, the I think the magic of the library is the humans who work there plus the collection.
Yeah.
Without that, um, without I mean, some people do want to talk to the librarians first. Some people don't want to talk to librarians ever. That's cool. They get it. That's why they're there.
Yeah. So tell me about the books being gone. I was like staggered. This was a 3-story, beautiful building. The building's still there. And I walk in, it's the Noble Science Library on campus at Arizona State University. And
Okay.
it used to be packed with all these science books, nothing but 3 stories. I
Hmm.
walk in and there's literally the racks are still there. The books are gone. Why are
Yeah,
the books gone?
that's a great question. So I don't know specifically at that particular academic library, but there's a few points of intersection that might be contributing to it. One is that the physical books have in many places. I'm thinking about the University of Missouri, Mizzou, at Columbia, where they've moved the books into a giant warehouse because the times that it's important to have that physical copy from the warehouse, they can retrieve it in a matter of hours. It's got a robot arm that goes around. It's really amazing to see. It's like a Doctor Who episode with these long stacks with a robot coming and grabbing it and bringing it up. So relocating it so
It's
there's more.
like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, where are the books? Oh, it's a secret
Exactly.
place. It's
Yeah,
locked
yeah, yeah.
behind a door and you need a pass.
No.
No? Okay.
Well, it's not that they're locked behind the door. It's that there's someplace other than where the campus needs a lot of students to be able to gather together for collaboration work. The other is that there are a number of different scientific and engineering and medical that have moved away from print. They've moved away from print and it's all online only. Nothing's born on paper anymore. It's born digital. So just the most recent version of, the most recent edition of might not exist on paper anymore, Daniel. So there's literally nothing to put on that shelf.
That makes me feel a little bit. I was panicking
Yeah.
just because the resources and no one wants to read books. I'm like, nobody wants to read books.
Yeah. No, but you're in a very specialized place, and maximizing access sometimes is not being dependent on the format. That being said, there's also a movement, though, in certain parts of academia, and I'm not suggesting it is at the University of Arizona, but there are some community colleges that no longer are required to have a library at all. And I think that's a real tragedy. The idea that community college is not a place for scholarship, it's a place for learning the trades only.
Hmm.
I think that we're doing something a real disservice to our country if we don't have a library in a context where there's professional development going on as well as personal development. It's higher ed,
And then
and
that would probably trickle down to the high schools. If they see a community college doesn't need a library, what's
Mhm.
to stop a high school from not having one?
Well, there's been a problem that's a 25 year long, almost a 25-year long problem in this country where when No Child Left Behind was set up, which is the law that predates the current one, which is called Every Student Succeeds, the No Child Left Behind did not require school libraries. And we saw significant diminishment of the number of school library programs and school librarians that are out there. And these aren't just, places in the school that have books, reference books, reading books. They're that faculty member who teaches information literacy, the faculty member who is the librarian who teaches about inquiry. And that is missing from a lot of states right now. And that's a real tragedy.
And is
Um,
that that's one of the bills the organization works on?
yeah, we work. Yeah, right now, our organization, EveryLibrary, is a political action committee for libraries. We work on law and public policy. We also have our nonprofit side, which is our public policy, tax policy, education policy think tank. It's called the EveryLibrary Institute. We help write good law. We help oppose bad law that affects the people who use libraries and Americans from all walks of life. And one of the things that we're working on right now is restoring school librarian jobs and school library collection budgets in these states that are missing it. It's an uphill battle because it's really hard to prove the negative. If you've gone through high school and you haven't had it, and everybody's test scores are lower, it doesn't look like it's missing. And yet we know, just empirically, if you compare states with school librarians and school library collections to, well, schools with school library collections and school librarians to schools that don't have it, the kids with school librarians score better in English, in reading and writing. They have better acuity on these basics. I mean, how do we function as individuals if we can't interact with information?
Is that because statistics? Is that because the ones with better grades are more affluent communities that have more money?
No, this is very interesting. We're not controlling. We can control for everything other than the family, like the structure of the family. When you control for almost everything other than, like, does the child have a stable home life? It's not about the zip code lottery. It's not about the funding for that particular school. You see it across districts. You see it between districts.
Oh, it sounds like you did consider this. So it comes down to, if you look at all the data, as simple as library or no library grades, good or bad.
It's the presence or absence of a school librarian and a collection that supports the curriculum and individual reading. And I mean, when you think about the experience that you were nervous for your nephew, you said,
I was just blown. Well, I was really excited. You've got to see this. He's in high school, he's thinking about engineering. I'm like, you've got to see this 3-story, like, science books everywhere. Walk in and there's empty racks, literally. Like, if they had just done it last year, they didn't know where to put the racks. And I didn't think to ask where the books went. I assumed they were, where would they take them? It's a 3-story building.
Right. Well, the ones I've seen tend to be underground, or it's like a bunker. But the difference between voluntarily relocating and forcibly or neglectfully missing the collection and missing those librarians, there's a very significant
And it's because of budget. That's what, like, kind of like music. They cut band, they cut libraries.
In high school and in K-12, when you see a school with a library and a librarian, it's either an enlightened principal or superintendent, or it's a state requirement. The same thing goes for music. Same thing goes for robust counselors and counseling. The same thing goes for art. I mean, the humanities.
I kind of understood cut and band practice. The library, didn't see that one coming. So that's part of what you do.
Well, I mean, I was a theater kid in high school. I mean, if we didn't have a theater program in high school, I don't know who I'd be today.
Yeah. So let's talk about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the whole life of the child, Daniel. Some kids are sports kids primarily. Great, let's have a good sports program. And some kids are theater nerds. Some kids are band nerds. Some kids are readers and creators in different ways. I mean,
that's the perfect way to say it. Creative in different ways. You're creative in theater. I'm an engineer, but also do music. But I think what people don't understand is the football players are creative too.
Yes, they are.
How are we going to win the game? How are we going to get stronger and faster? It's a different type of creativity. And the keywords creativity and discovery and innovation, new ideas, not just, oh, I'm going to be tough in sports or I'm going to be an actor. Creativity either way. You're missing part of the creativity for those people that aren't athletes.
That's absolutely right.
So there was this high school I went to, visited recently, and it just happened to be banned book month.
Yes.
I didn't know there was such a thing, but what I was shocked to see is they had on display some examples of banned books. The Giving Tree, or the tree that gives, the Giving Tree. So for those who aren't aware of this book, and it's banned. If you know the book, like, how can that book be banned? I had to Google it this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Find out it was a public library in Colorado that interpreted as sexist. How is a tree? It's a children's picture book. A tree, a picture of a tree and a child on how they love, or the relationship is in the end the kid cuts down the tree to build a canoe or something, and the tree stump still loves him.
Mm-hmm.
The giving
Mm-hmm.
tree.
Mm-hmm.
How is that sexist? And it came up to be what's the story? The readers, some readers believe in Colorado, the young boy continually takes from a female tree. And as the boy grows up, he always comes back to the female tree when he needs something. Taking to the tree has nothing left to give him. Like, how is the tree female? It's not wearing a dress. And how does it get banned? Which, so where I'm going with this, John, is how is that possible? How can you ban a book?
Well, the specifics of that don't, I mean, it doesn't, it's hard to talk about any one in particular. But what we see in general is that book banning comes from a couple of different places. There are people who are concerned. You know, they have sincere beliefs about books that might be that they see as being either inappropriate or harmful.
We got to protect the young readers.
Yeah, and they come at it. They come at it with a sincere belief, and I have a lot of respect for that. In fact, the freedom of speech in the First Amendment to the Constitution is right alongside the right to petition, which is, you know, one of the five freedoms, and the ability to go to a public library and say, I have a petition. I have a grievance. I have a redress of grievance.
Mm.
I'm concerned about this book. Those are co-equal rights in the First Amendment, and I dig that.
Okay. Yeah.
It's the idea, though, that a individual's belief system can override a community's interest, or that my perspective on a part of my community can somehow or another criminalize that part of the community. That's where it gets pernicious, Daniel. It's where
I mentioned the criminal part for listeners because I don't think
yeah,
they understand the gravity of the
sure.
situation.
So by law, you know, the Constitution says the Constitution says unconstitutional censorship is you keep it in a library unless it's illegal. Okay, it's harmful, it's obscene, it's somehow or another illegal. Then that's a good reason to get rid of it. Otherwise, keep it because your viewpoint as a government is to be neutral, and the viewpoint of the book shouldn't be really relevant to the government, which is the public library, by the way, the schools, you know, to begin with. So in order to ban a book, you have to say that it's illegal. The book is somehow or another obscene. It's encouraging criminal behavior. It is somehow or another harmful. And it's that charge that the book is criminal that is the most pernicious, because a lot of the attacks are on LGBTQ titles. They're on LGBTQ authors. They're on communities of color.
And then
You know,
when it becomes criminal, it is a criminal charge. If you read, how does that work? If you were found to be reading the book, it would be a criminal charge?
so there's two parts to this. One is the criminalization of the collection, the book itself,
The librarians.
and then the other is the individuals who work at the library. Okay, so let me pull those two things apart. One is to say that the color purple, the Tom Sawyer, the Giving Tree is somehow or another obscene. Is a charge that says the book itself is a criminal action. Okay, and so so you could take that to a judge. And there have been cases recently where somebody's tried to sue to remove a book from a bookstore like Barnes and Noble or from a public library to say those books are obscene. And the judge says it's not obscene. It doesn't meet the test of obscenity. We keep the book. And public library boards sometimes say, we'll keep the book. Other times they say, we'll get rid of the book because we agree that this book about a population or particular people, we don't agree that they have the same validity as other people do. On the criminalization of the profession, though, Daniel, that's interesting because since the Kennedy administration around the country, there has been what's called a defense from prosecution, The librarians were educators, museum professionals. Could you imagine if this country had criminal charges levied against the people who run museums because they got statues and pictures of naked people from the 1570s? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had something called defense from prosecution, where a local DA, some local sheriff, couldn't go in and charge the English teacher or the history teacher or the art teacher or the school librarian or public librarian or museum professional with a crime for what's on the shelf or what's on the walls. That's being eroded around the country. That's under attack right now. The criminalization of these professions, these institutions, um,
Oh, who takes the time and goes, I want to erode that? What's the interest?
17 states last year and the year before, the last session of the state legislatures.
How does something like that start? What's their logic?
It's interesting because when you look at the 17 states that we fought against, there were four states that passed bills to criminalize libraries or librarianship or educators. Two of them were vetoed by their governors. That was Idaho and North Dakota. One of them went to court. That was Arkansas. They went to court to say that this law is unconstitutional. How dare you? Criminalize libraries and education. And then in Indiana, they passed it. And now, if you're in Indiana as a school, as a public library teacher, as a counselor, as a health educator, a school librarian, a principal, or a school board member, you could have some local DA say that the book on sex ed is obscene and go after you. Okay, and it's the same states that are anti-LGBTQ. It's the same states that are doing anti-CRT bills.
So there's a group behind it. That's
Absolutely.
the real objective are those gay and lesbian issues, not the
Yep.
giving tree.
It's
It's a back way in.
it's a soft target in a lot of ways. Yes. Yep.
The real objective is not literally,
Well, so
you see it, you understand it.
we've been in the trenches now for a couple of years on this, and the idea that you can criminalize a book, you can go after a title and say that book is somehow inappropriate or obscene or criminal. It's easier than going after a population. In America today, there's a lot of, we have gay marriage. We have transgender individuals can show up to work like they as who they are, like we've got interracial marriage. All right. Like I'm only 53, 54. I'm in my early middle ages. Interracial marriage was illegal in this country.
I'm from Cleveland. I grew up in the 70s in Cleveland.
Yes, sir.
I won't even mention what my grandfather used to call colored people.
Yes. No, Daniel.
Or live in the same neighborhood. They wouldn't allow. I'm like, so they can live couple streets down. How's this to kid? I'm trying to process how that's logical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, we are 5 minutes away from a very different society, and our memories are short. These protections for individual human beings are easy to erode.
In your line of work, you're basically working with, like you told me, you're 2 minutes late to the show because you were talking to a senator.
Yeah.
I would have waited longer.
You're very kind.
So you're battling stuff like this. It seems like you're fighting fires. Is there a holy grail, one way to really stop what's happening? A solution for people at home in their own community, listeners?
That's a great question. So we have a platform that we built about 18 months ago called Fight for the First. Fightforthefirst.org. It's a little bit like change.org. It's a little bit like GoFundMe, where we can put up a campaign in 5 minutes. If there's a problem someplace, you tell us where the problem is. You tell us about the problem. We can start activating people in your community locally. And we've had 88,000 people take an action in the last 18 months on 106 different local campaigns.
Nice.
And that's a zip code level. There's a problem right now. We're recording today on October 16th. There's a problem in Penridge School District in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. We found out about it yesterday. We're already up and running on it this morning. And by saying up and running on it, we are doing calls to action to citizens, to neighbors, to inform them, educate them, and activate them.
What's this specific one about?
This one's about the book Perks of Being a Wallflower. which has been out for about 1 million years and it was made into a movie. Steve Chbosky, he's a good author and a filmmaker. It's a coming of age story.
They're trying
You
to
know,
ban a book.
they're trying to ban the book. Yeah, yeah.
What is the book about if you were to ask the author?
So I actually had the pleasure of being in your seat the other day. I was doing some interviews during Banned Books Week. We had every library did like a literary festival during Banned Books Week a couple weeks ago, and I got to interview him along with a couple other people. And if you were to ask him why, it's because he talks about what it's like to be a teenager. What's it like to be a teenager? How do you feel? What's going on in your life? What are relationships like? It's part of the conversation about growing up.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of people, well, not that many, maybe 5% of the American population, maybe 8% of the American population, who think that Footloose was a documentary. That we need to shut down, seriously, that you and I are in a similar demographic.
I
Yeah.
mean,
So
you just have to watch the movie to get that it's not a documentary, even
I
if you don't
know.
know who. I mean, I don't even really know specifically recall. It's a Patrick Swayze, Kenny Loggins.
It was Kenny Loggins and not Patrick Swayze, it was that other guy, Kevin Bacon. It was Kevin Bacon.
Okay.
Yeah. That being said, like this idea that we should be protecting children from childhood, we should be protecting children from their own identity, we should be protecting children from growing up. That's a key driver for some of these people who are looking to ban books, and this is a symptom of it.
So it's a negative, not a negative story. It's a real story,
It's a real story. Well, I mean, it's a fiction story, but
fictional story.
yeah,
All you got to do is pull up Netflix these days, and it's hard to find a movie that's not violent or drama or
Daniel,
sexist.
there's two things here, man. One is that like Americans are always more comfortable with violence than they are with sex. The Marvel movies, for example, are ridiculously violent.
Yeah.
The
So back to this, your action though. What did this on this book? What's the title of it again?
perks of being a wallflower.
What about the childhood do people not think is not, they don't want other kids to read about?
Here's the thing: if I felt that my own kid shouldn't or couldn't, that's my choice as a parent.
Hmm.
Okay, but I'm not going to go next door or down the street or across the alley and say your kid can't either. Like the idea that my own personal comfort or discomfort drives society-wide behavior or access is the problem. Anybody's individual choices should be empowered. And in fact, that's what good librarianship does. It's like your brother should have gone to the card catalog. Your brother could have gone to the librarians. As somebody who's a user, like the idea that comfort or discomfort is driving public policy and law. I think that we need to scale back a bit. Let's get back to the core issues around freedom of speech and the
Hmm.
Constitution. Let's get back to the idea that there's a little bit of live and let live going on. The particulars, I can't say from where I'm sitting what the particulars are for those people who complained about perks of being a wallflower in the Penrith School District. I haven't seen the complaint yet.
Okay.
That being said, why take it away from every other kid and every other family?
Well, what comes to mind is how then do you say you have something as serious as child pornography,
Mhm.
Playboy and whatnot.
Absolutely. That is, yep.
How do you decide, okay, that's not acceptable?
Sure. So mainstream publishers and public libraries and school districts in this country do not collect pornography. They don't. They don't collect obscenity. They don't publish it. There are publishing companies. There are places that make movies. They do podcasts even about.
Hmm.
That's not collected by public libraries or schools. It is not to suggest that a book on sex ed is pornographic misplaces what pornography is.
So meaning I think what you're saying is when they publish that stuff,
Hmm.
they themselves have labeled it in that classification. So it makes the library's job easy. You your publisher is
Yeah.
categorizing it as this.
So back in January of 2023, the group over at Common Sense Media Common Sense Media is a big parents' rights kind of organization or parents' information organization. They want to make sure that parents are well informed about. So they do a voluntary rating system on media and on books. It's like Rotten Tomatoes, but whether or not they're smoking, drinking, sex, whatever in a movie, they do a survey occasionally. And back in January 2023, they did a very big survey of American teenagers, and they asked a very important question, Daniel, which is, where do you get your pornography? And
Dad's dresser under the sock drawers.
well, 0% of the kids replied the public library or the school library. Most of them on the phone. Okay.
Oh.
Most of them. Okay. They got it from friends. They got it from a website. The problem of pornography in this country, the problem of sexualization and grooming, the problems that happen socially and emotionally to these kids are not coming from the public library or the schools. They're coming from different vectors. They're coming from different sources. And this country has gotten distracted to the point of harming these kids even more by not addressing the real source of the problem. And the real sources of the problem need to be looked at with some alacrity. If 0% of kids if 0% of them are getting it from the public library or the school library, and it's coming through their phones, why are we paying attention to a place that doesn't affect them?
We should have a fair playing field. Do the same thing then with the cellular access. So, what is another big thing you're working on at your organization besides the censorship? And
yeah, no, that's a great question. So we got our start 13 years ago doing public library election days, and around the country, there's 37 states that have some form of going out to the ballot for funding for libraries. It might be a local bond measure to build a new building.
Oh, I didn't even realize they would put that on the ballot.
Yeah.
They would put build a new building. That's on the ballot. Okay. Yeah.
It's on the ballot. Yeah. So look, do we want to issue a bond? Do we want to issue some debt? So there's a bunch of states that require local government, like a public library or a school district, to go out and say, yes, we want to raise our taxes. Okay.
Nobody wants taxes raised.
Well, why are we going to use it? And that it's the how are we going to use it? What are we going to use it for question, and the who's going to spend it question that we started working on 13 years ago as the National Political Action Committee for Libraries. So we've been very successful. We work with libraries when they're on the ballot and help them communicate effectively with their voters. And so we've got 6 election days coming up in November that are just for public library funding. Now, what's happened in the last couple of years is that sometimes we get a frustrated book banner or censor who then wants to go after the library structure. And those are crisis campaigns, and we have 2 of those this November. But I really like the opportunity campaigns. The chance to talk to voters and citizens to say, we want to enhance our library services.
Frustrated people about the book bans, they got to understand it's not the library's fault, right?
Well, when I say a frustrated book banner, somebody who can't get the book banned because the library is following the law and the Constitution, I'll go after the money. Okay?
People have something better to do.
Yeah. So, but what I really like doing, and what we've been doing now for 13 years, is helping communities put new ideas for their library to work, or put new buildings up. I mean,
which is an idea I have for the book banners.
How's that?
Here's how you make a difference. Spend your time and energy not banning somebody else's free speech. Write your own book.
Right.
And spend your money and your time. Get a tour bus, get 1 million copies printed, drive around the country, hand them out at the downtown coffee shops, give them to libraries.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because the public library shelf, when you're walking around that public library like we were talking about a little while ago, and you stumble across something, you go to the biography section, okay? You've got biographies of civil rights pioneers sitting right alongside radio and TV personalities who are very conservative. You got your Rush Limbaughs right next to your MLKs, And the idea that there's not both of those things in the library means that they've never come to the library. They've never really looked around.
Another thing a lot of those people don't realize, you can't, because I do as an author, when I'm traveling, I go to a library and I take a copy of my book and I give it to them and I go, give this to a librarian. If you like it, put it on your shelf. If you don't, pass it on.
Yeah, yeah.
They're open to, they're not going to buy your book. Again, back to funding. I mean, they can't put everybody's book on the shelf if you're
Hmm.
self-published,
Hmm.
but they will put even self-published people's on their shelf if they like them.
Absolutely. No, 25% of the books on a library shelf in certain genres are indie or indie presses or indie authors.
I
It's
would encourage the book banners, instead of infringing on other people's
hmm
what they're saying,
hmm
say what you want to say.
hmm Well, I think it's a uniquely American moment, the idea that you can the freedom of expression in America is unparalleled, and I don't want to see it diminished. And the current censorship moment is putting every perspective in peril. The slippery slope of censorship, Daniel, is
Yeah,
it's
so tell me about the LGBT. I even can't keep up with these acronyms because I have a feeling there's some I don't know behind that. Um, what is it about these groups? It sounds like there's some groups in Pacific like that that are behind the censorship.
well, so from an LGBTQIA perspective, you have a right to have your story told. If I'm, but it's the same thing for religious
Hmm.
perspectives and minority race and ethnicity as well. I mean, the idea that somebody's experience as a Sikh or Muslim or Buddhist or Catholic or whatever should be eliminated from the library because somebody does not like Sikhs or Buddhists or Catholics or I mean, it's the same thing according to civil rights law, especially about who you are. The who you are. Um, I have to. I might
It's
disagree
a
with you.
slippery slope for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
That can really change ways people think uh, that they think.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I look at, on the censorship side of things, we keep books in the library unless they're illegal. The First Amendment, unconstitutional censorship, is to remove something that's not illegal. Okay, it's to remove something based on viewpoint or perspective. But why do we bring the book in the library in the first place? A lot of the times because the majority is interested in it. That's why we got bestseller shelves. We got the most popular stuffs at the front of the building because the majority, whatever the majority looks like or acts like, says that's a fun book. I wanted to get that book. Okay, I want the next one of those books. But we've got minority perspectives in the library because we're America. We have minority stories in America, so we should have them on our shelves.
Is libraries are basically curated, right? Because you can't have space for every single book in the universe.
That's right. But also, libraries are cooperative. So, depending on where you are in the country, you might have what's called interlibrary loan, where if my local library doesn't have it and somebody in my network does, I can get it. And I also can tell you that I know there's something called patron-centered collection design, where if you, Daniel, you go to your library and you say, "I'd really like to get my hands on this book. Can you find it somewhere?" And they say no, and then you can say, "Can you acquire it?" And they look at it and see, okay, can we circulate this a couple times to other people besides Daniel? You know,
Hmm.
and if they feel like they can, they'll get it for you. In fact, there's libraries around the country.
I was thinking about the book banners again because I
Yeah.
think they're not thinking outside the box. Or maybe they disagree with what I'm saying. Say I have in my hometown, my library, I don't want a certain book there. The library is curating books to some extent.
hmm
Someone could still get your book instead of banning it. What do you want to see in your library, your community? Go that route.
You know, there's such an abundance to what you're describing. There's such a positiveness to what you're describing, Daniel, about that. Like let's have a more abundant society, as opposed to let's have a society where we diminish the ability of people to access information or ideas, or we diminish the opportunities for people to have their stories told.
I would encourage a discussion at that local library with the rest of the community. I want to, in the book banner, I might learn, you know what? No, everyone else disagrees with me. Maybe I should move.
Well, I mean, I'm not suggesting it's easy to be a neighbor. It's hard to be a neighbor. You know, we make decisions all the time as neighbors based on elections, based on public meetings, based on conversations in the public space, in the public forum. I mean, you know, how do we, some of the biggest fights in my hometown have been over trees. You know, are we going to trim the trees? What's wrong with that tree? That tree should not come out, you know?
Yeah.
It's not like we're banning trees. It's that we all have some different opinion about what it means to be
Hmm.
neighborly and in neighborhood together.
Yeah.
And the book ban doesn't a book ban fight or an anti-tax movement. You know, the folks who are like any tax is a bad tax. Let's have a conversation about what good taxation looks like. You know, that's like I said, we've been working on that for 13 years now. Um, how do we have these conversations with each other as opposed to at each other or in spite of each other?
So what is your vision? We opened with trying to give people a picture if they haven't had the experience of exploring a library, just getting lost and discovering stuff.
Sure.
What's your vision for the perfect library in the future? And what else are you working on? Or what are you working on? Or what can people do to make that a reality?
That's a great question. So my own library is not going to be your own library, but our library together, I believe, should have a couple of key things. One is enough funding to bring in a collection that has some real dynamicism to it and diversity to it. I want to see those engineering books on the shelf. I want to see that popular mechanics on the shelf next to the cookbooks, next to the history, mystery, fiction. You know, I'm not a big fiction reader, by the way, Daniel. I'm not a good fiction reader. My wife is. She's got a stack of books at the bedside. It's going to fall over and kill us one night. You know, I'm not. I'm more of a nonfiction guy myself. I want to see that diverse, dynamic collection. You know, also in formats because there's a lot of humans out there who still read books. I think it's somewhere in the high 70% just read print, and that's great. I love it. And then there's a bunch of people who access it through some sort of device. That's wonderful. There's a lot of people who listen to books rather than read them because they enjoy it or they need to for different learning styles and
Mhm.
listening styles. I mean, the dynamicism and diversity is the reoccurring theme. You know, I'd like a spot in the library to go and be quiet. I'd like a spot in the library to go and hang out with other humans and spend some time. I want a spot in the library where my kid and other people's kids can be a little noisy from time to time. You know,
Mhm.
these are attributes I think of a functional community anchor institution, a functional component of society. Where can we go to be alone together? Where can we go together so that we're not alone?
The noise and the quiet one and the kids and the no kids and all that stuff, that's another,
Hmm.
those are important things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not just pie in the skying it. You know, it takes money. It takes tax money. The reason that we've got a public library today in America that's so functional and so robust, and it is. I mean, the book ban situation is happening. It's not casual right now. It's a concerted attack, and some states have restrictions on access or restrictions on identity that are pernicious, and they're state sponsored. Other places, though, there's no crisis going on except for the funding. There's no problem going
You
on.
know, the ironic thing about the funding is, as a speaker, I'm
Hmm.
sick of hearing the word innovation. And they're like, Daniel, your title, you climb mountains that have never been climbed. You're an innovator.
Hmm.
Okay, what do I? Oh, I'm speaking about innovation, and yet we even having a discussion about not supporting libraries with their taxes.
Yeah.
What what are people not understanding?
Hmm.
Walking the walk. You know, we'd be innovative society. We're going to go to Mars, and we're not going to have
Yeah.
libraries in our
Yeah.
high schools.
You know, my wife and I were at the Olympic National Park the other day. It was our anniversary weekend. We went out. We live in suburban Chicago. We took a nice little flight out to Seattle, and we went up to Hurricane Ridge. Okay, I don't know if you've ever been up to that one in particular, but if it wasn't for the WPA and it wasn't for the CCC back in the day, building trails. Okay, now we weren't breaking new trails. We weren't blazing a trail ourselves. We were on either asphalt or crushed gravel. And a guy like me, who's not much of a climber,
Yeah.
could go out there and experience it. Okay, I got to stand on a promontory and look at Puget Sound. Okay, from I don't know 3,500 feet up, 4,000 feet up, and I broke a sweat and my glutes. Like I mean, I'm not a climber, Daniel, and yet because of the infrastructure that America decided to tax ourselves to put together, a guy like me could get up there and have a moment that was quite beautiful. And I think that the equivalent happens in libraries, it happens in art and museums, it happens in ballparks all around the country. Those different moments of transcendence that happen because we've decided to be a decent society. That's all I'm looking for.
Nice. Um, you're a busy guy. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to make sure listeners hear about?
The biggest thing here is that the book ban situation is really not a progressive situation. It cuts across conservative and libertarian issues as well. It's not just about the topics of the book. We've been talking about things like sexuality and identity and things like that. But really, like, why does any libertarian want to see the government say that you can't read something? Why does any conservative want to have society crumble because we've got this tyranny of a small group? I mean, like, this is not a progressive issue. This is an American issue. And regardless of your political perspective, the live and let live here, the slippery slope issues need to be looked at. And I would hope that Americans could come together in that constitutional framework, in a civic way about the institution of the library or the framework around public education for the public good, and get past this personality.
And the way they can is basically, you mentioned it's an app or it's a website. I'll put in the show notes. They go to be alerted about local
Yeah.
legislation.
Yeah. And what we want to be able to do with our fightforthefirst.org site is alert people who are libertarians, who are like, unconstitutional censorship's a problem. We want to alert people who are progressives, who say we should not be going after these stories because they're telling true stories about humans. And we want to go and we want to alert the conservatives, like, what are they trying to do to your hometown? Really, what are they trying to do to your hometown? Why are you going to let those 7 people?
That's a great way to put it. I'm trying to digest the word conservative, which I guess means Republican mostly, definitions, and what they would like or hate. I live in Utah now.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about this state, whether you like the religion or not, these people, they want their rights.
Absolutely.
And they are full for, freedom of speech.
Yep.
And all these political things. End of the day, whether you agree with or disagree, it's respectable how what they really want is to be left alone.
It is a very American story. Just the Utah's got some significant anti-book.
Oh, do they? After just I plugged them really. I didn't know that.
But it's not coming from a particular religious perspective. There are certain political actors, and the state of Utah, though, is fighting for its own rights. The citizens of Utah have been fighting. We have an organization that we support called Let Utah Read, and
Wow.
that is folks from all walks of life, Daniel, who are coming together to say enough is enough with this.
Wait, what's happening in my own state? I just moved here last year. I didn't realize.
Did you?
Yeah.
So there was a particular piece of legislation that allows for book bans to become statewide book bans in schools if 3 school districts ban the book. Okay, so if there's 3 schools, if Ogden, St. George, and Nehi get together and they say we're going to ban this book, then it becomes universal across the state to ban the book.
So contradictory to what my observation was, and why?
Utah, folks around Utah from all walks of life are outraged by this. They are completely outraged by it.
Oh, so the people are the local people.
Yeah, and your elections coming up in November are really a referendum on that civil liberties issue. That civil society issue.
So is it outside? Is it outside? Like they call them carpetbaggers. I just still don't understand what the carpetbagger means. Once I read the definition, an outsider from out of state comes into your state and sees an opportunity to pounce. Is that what's happening?
No, I don't think so. I think this is a uniquely Utah version of it.
Hmm.
It's part of a broader social and political movement, though, that exists in every state. I mean, my home state of Illinois is what they call a trifecta, where the two houses of the legislature and the governor's office are the same party. You know, it just happens to be Democrat over here. There's Republican ones in other places. There are trifectas. And you know, Illinois had an early bill. They were one of the early states to put up a bill that would ban book bans. Okay, and there's still folks in the state who are trying to advance an anti-person agenda, trying to advance an anti-government agenda, an anti-civil society agenda. I mean, Illinois is not immune from it. It's just that in Utah, they happen to be a lot more of them in the state legislature.
Hmm. I'll have to look into that more.
Yeah, I think
I'll
it's
get on the
important.
alert.
Yeah.
What's the website again for your alert?
So our calls to action are at fightforthefirst.org. Those are the local campaigns, zip code level campaigns, you know, for the to put the books back on the shelf and to stop the shenanigans around book banning. You can also go to everylibrary.org, which is our main website. And then in the lead up to the election, we also have a website called Libraries 2024. Libraries 2024, because it's coming up. And that covers a lot of the issues as well. So happy to get that out there to your listeners.
And you know you're speaking of, the local stuff, the local elections. I had the League of Women Voters, an executive from League of Women's Voters on, and I was surprised to learn just how much people think. She was like, most people only go to vote when it's the president, and they make a big deal of the president. They don't realize that it's these local, every year November elections, the local ones where all the real things that are really affecting your life matter are taking place.
Well, this is very interesting because the top of the ticket this year is a particularly stark contrast between the candidates. But the state legislatures, the governor's races, the statewide initiatives. I mean, in Utah right now, there's a measure on the ballot for a statewide. It's on a statewide ballot. It's a constitutional amendment. It's called Amendment 2, I believe, that would allow local school districts to have their money diverted away from public schools and into charters and private schools. Now, is that what should we be doing that with tax money, or should that be private conversations amongst families to choose to put their kids into a religious school or into a charter school or private school? That's a big policy issue. But school districts are on the ballot in your state and my state, school boards, and then local referendums. I mean, I agree with your friend over at the League of Women Voters. It's exactly why we're paying attention at all levels of government.
Nice. Any last words, John?
Daniel, I think that the idea that there's an abundant society rather than a negative society that you brought up so eloquently, the idea that we should be vigilant, though, when you walked into that library, with your nephew, and you took a look around, the vigilance that we need to make sure that we're living in the kind of society that we all want to live in, that we all have a personal component of that. I think that's one of my biggest takeaways from this conversation today.
Yes. I appreciate what you're doing, John. It's good work. Keep it up.
Thank you
Thanks for being on my show. And
oh, what a treat. What a real treat. Nice conversation today.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Cheers.